All right, joining us now, New York Times best-selling mystery writer Brad Meltzer. Now, he has a new nonfiction book out. It's called Ordinary People Can Change the World. And Brad, before we get into the book, I was reading something interesting. This is really an offshoot of something you tell your children, I believe, which is there's a difference between fame and heroism.
We're going to talk about that for sure. That should be we should talk about that as the first question and why I wrote it.
And so describe that, because they're, from what I understand, they would look at these models and these actors and look up to them, and you were thinking, you know, there are some other people you might want to start looking at.
That's exactly right. You know, I started writing these books because I say to my kids all the time, I was tired of them looking at reality stars and loudmouth athletes and thinking those are heroes. I tell my kids all the time, that's fame. Fame is very different than being a hero. And I wanted my kids to see real heroes. So I started writing these children's books. As you can see, Abraham Lincoln behind me, Amelia Earhart. And we tell the stories of them not just when they're adults, but also when they're kids as well. So we see them when they're little kids. Abraham Lincoln when he's a boy, Amelia Earhart when she's a little girl. And as a result, you get to see not just an icon that we know, but a real person. So we can see the power and potential in each of us. That's what kids see when they read the books.
Absolutely. And you made a T-shirt, I believe, with a saying on the back to go along with this. It just really seems like something that a lot of parents are going to appreciate having at their disposal.
Yeah, you know, what happened was I can tell my daughter that Amelia Earhart flew across the ocean. My daughter goes, well, so does everybody else. You know, lots of people do. But if I tell her when Amelia Earhart was 7 years old, she built a homemade roller coaster in her backyard, that she took a milk crate and she put roller skating wheels on the bottom of it. She lugged it up to the top of her tool shed. Then she put two big wooden planks, greased them with lard so she'd move fast down them, and then races off the top of the tool shed down to the bottom, crashes, tumbles, gets up and goes, that was awesome. Now my daughter reads that and say, oh my gosh, Amelia Earhart's just like me. She's daring and she's, you know, will challenge herself and she's up for adventure. And now Amelia Earhart isn't some black and white figure who's in a book. Amelia Earhart's alive. And Abraham Lincoln's alive. So we found stories from their childhoods that kids can just relate to and say, oh, they're just like me. And to me, that's the best way. You know, these aren't the stories of famous people. These are the stories of what we're all capable of on our very best days.
Hi, this is Jennifer here working with Adam this morning. One thing I wanted to ask you is, I think sometimes when you see these people who are so great, you're almost maybe intimidated to make a mistake, because we celebrate all their accomplishments, but I feel like we don't always hear about their mistakes. But I was on your website this morning talking about how Abraham Lincoln did lose some of his political races. And is that a part of what you're teaching too, that these heroes that we look up to, sometimes they make mistakes too, and that's okay?
Yeah, no, thank you for such a good question. I mean, that's exactly right. Abraham Lincoln lost 5 elections before he finally won. You know, and one of the stories that's in there is it shows Abraham Lincoln when he's a little boy. He's 10 years old. He comes across a group of turtles, and these boys are playing with the turtles. And he gets there, and he sees that they're not playing with them. They're putting hot coals on the backs of the turtles. They're torturing them. And Abraham Lincoln, at this moment, he's a little 10-year-old boy, can walk away, right? It's hard to do the right thing, but someone has to. And Lincoln looks at them and says, take the coals off the turtles. And they're like, what? And he says, take the coals off the turtles. He stands up for that injustice. And to me, that's what kids need. You know, if we just say Abraham Lincoln was president, he freed the slaves, what are our kids going to live up to that? I mean, how do they react to that? But when my daughter or my sons read that, they go, oh my gosh, I love animals, he loves animals, you can do right in this world. And so I think showing their flaws, showing what they were, that's really the way to teach what a real hero is.
Let me ask you, why do we boil down these great figures into these short 1- or 2-sentence stories that, you know, or why do we extract the reality of these people to only, you know, include the good things? Why don't we want complete leaders or public figures or people that we, you know, idolize? Why don't we want a complete story?
Sure. And you know what? I think we actually do want that story, but it gets lost in history. And what happens is, as you said, it just gets boiled down. It gets reduced and reduced and reduced until it's just almost nothing left. And what I realize is, you know, history is not a bunch of dates and facts that you memorize. History is a selection process, and it chooses every single one of us every single day. And the only question is, do you hear the call? And for me, when I read this, I said, you know what? I want my kids to hear that call. I want them to see. I can tell my kids all the time that you should stand up for others. I can tell my kids to dare to do what no one's done before. But that's like telling my kids to be good and expect them to be good. When I tell them that story of Amelia Earhart when she's little, right? And we know that doesn't work as parents.
No, it doesn't.
When I tell them that story of Amelia Earhart when she's a girl, or Abraham Lincoln when he's standing up for those turtles, then they have something they can lock onto. And there's nothing that is remembered more than a good story. You give a kid a good story, they'll never forget that lesson.
Yep.
All right.
Agree.
Thanks so much, Brad.
Cool. That'll be an interesting
Great.
one. I
I look forward to that because it's amazing how many bad stories there are out there. We got a lot of books over the holidays, which I'm thrilled about, but that means we could purge all the ones that had really bad lessons, like showed a lot of bad behavior, and we're like, we don't want her knowing this stuff. We want good role models.
There's plenty of time to learn all that stuff.
I'm looking forward to seeing his books.
Yeah,
cool.
good point.